as a country, how important is the space program for defense?
The world has been talking about it, but it has been demonstrated very well in the recent some of the conflicts. It has a potential to scale up significantly. One or two of the studies which are recently done on domains of space applications, it is very surprising to see more than 50% of the space-based applications will be in defense. It changes the entire narrative of the economy of space system. This is going to expand substantially in the coming days. New technologies are going to come. For example, they can have powerful lasers which can be fired against the missile which is coming from a satellite to kill a missile, not from a ground. Then the next issue is you have to protect your own satellites because the satellites are also a war equipment now. Then somebody also will put satellites of similar nature. So they will fight each other in the satellite regime.
Full Star Wars. As ISRO chairman, who would you look at? Would Elon Musk, SpaceX, NASA, who would you look at for learning curve, for benchmarking?
We are very unique and no one to compare. For this much of money and this much of resources and knowledge, can you do the outcome of this class? I think it is very difficult. Once we do missions to Moon, missions to Mars, all this creates, within the minds of young people. Yeah, here is one country which you thought will not do such high-tech work, is capable of doing it and demonstrating. I think that has changed the entire narrative now. I think people feel inspired by the work which we do in ISRO.
Dr. Somanath, this conversation has been in the making for a very long time. So delighted that we are finally having this conversation. And of course, now you've moved out of ISRO. For those who don't know, Dr. Somanath is ex-chairman of ISRO, India's premier space body that steers all of our actually so far space pursuits in the world, right? So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Delighted
and great to have you here, Dr. Somanath. We have interacted on and off in the ecosystem. You've been very active in the Bangalore science and technology ecosystem and the startup ecosystem. When did you actually have that space bug bite you? And was it something that happened later? And what academic pursuits did you do to align to that interest?
See, my background is mostly a village background in Kerala. There was so much of thrust on education at that time, though it was village. So I had access to so many books and reading materials at that time. Of course, naturally fascinated with science and technology I was genuinely interested in space and astronomy at that point in time, coming out of my father's passion for the same subjects. He was a teacher, a school teacher, but he had so much of interest in science, mathematics, technology, literature. He was reading quite a bit. And all those books were there for me to read in my childhood. So it developed those passions that time. And of course, in science, I did very well during my school days. I was a state topper in science. Then the real interest for space as a job in ISRO came much later. It was not
so undergrad, where did you pursue your undergrad? In Kerala itself?
In engineering, for example, I did in Kerala. There is a college called TKM College of Engineering.
Right.
That was just before all those engineering college explosion took.
Correct.
There were very few colleges at that time. So it was all done by government allocation at that time. So I went into that college which was allocated by government admissions.
And then where was your first job out of campus?
No, I got a job in ISRO much before I graduated. So I was selected when I was doing my final year through a process of recruitment that ISRO used to conduct at that time. They will invite students much before they graduate.
This was which year?
1985. So I was only waiting for my results to be declared to join ISRO. So it was not a post academics joining.
As a child, what is it about space that fascinated you?
Many things. For example, if you look at the sky, you see a picture which is painted there. And the whole picture is not there. No, it's not real. It's a picture which has existed many years back. And you are looking at it. You are looking at it and wondering. And you look at the whole concept of the cosmos, the universe, its creation, its evolution. You can only look and sit and wonder. So there is so much of wonderment around the universe, the way in which all this came about. Today you have a connect between many domains of science to the creation of the universe. So with the new knowledge that is adding, our wonderment only increases. It just doesn't settle or doesn't get all the answers even now. So it keeps an excitement to everyone. I really get fascinated by that.
Did you ever think, as you were growing up with this wonderment, that you would be heading an organization like ISRO ever?
That was definitely, yes. I was in ISRO in the early periods of PSLV. Somehow I was sure that I will one day.
Do you want to explain what PSLV was?
PSLV is the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle project, which I joined immediately after my recruitment.
80s.
Yeah, so in 1985, then till 1994, I was in that project until it was launched successfully. So I felt that I have an ability to work with teams, people. So and I can see that around me. I was being accepted as a leader in that small team itself at that point in time itself. So many people were actually looking at me as a potential candidate to handle a top job at some point in time. And of course, my seniors were also helping me to train myself to handle such responsibilities. It's sort of a peer support, leadership support, etc. The journey to the top will always happen with that type of support. So I felt that I could definitely make it someday. It was not by accident, I can tell you for sure.
As you look back. But even before we go there, 1970s, 80s, your growing up years, India was a different country. We were really a third world country, struggling for the basics, right? And when Sputnik went, I think 1960s, right?
Yes.
When Russia put its man in the moon, and then the US also did it. What was it like, the feeling here in India? Do you remember any of that in those days, that these things really felt so big as a dream and mission for us to accomplish?
No, the moon mission of the Americans, I was not fully present at that time to understand the gravity of the situation as a student.
That was much later.
And it was
You were a kid,
much younger. But when I joined ISRO, the age of rockets have just begun in ISRO. APJ Abdul Kalam was there. He was building the first SLV-3 rocket. The Aryabhatta was just launched, and we were already into space. I joined ISRO as a second generation person, not as a first generation. So if you talk about the early feeling, I may not be the right person to tell you. But I can definitely tell about the issues that was there in the second generation people.
Mm-hmm.
We had just made our first rocket. SLV-3 was made. The first few satellites were already launched. But then we were not into operational regime. It was not providing any services to anyone. So I entered into ISRO the moment we are looking at how space can become useful to people. So, and it was not visible. The PSLV was still not developed. The Indian remote sensing satellites have never been launched by that time. The communication infrastructure based on satellites were not in place. So that was the time I joined. That was a time when rockets were failing. There was a period where a lot of failures were happening. So I joined.
And why was that? Just looking back.
It is an issue of scaling.
When you go from.
So when Kalam was doing the rocket, it was a small rocket.
Right.
And it was not an operational rocket. The payload capability was hardly 40 kilograms.
So you went from 40
You need to put 1 ton.
1 ton.
And when you make a complex rocket with that type of capacity, the knowledge level was not adequate to build that. And those small issues, which was yet not understood, caused those failures. And those periods were the learning periods of how to understand the complexities of flying a rocket and how to control aerodynamics and many. But that was a period of intense learning. So I entered into the fray all that time. So I had an opportunity to understand those issues.
So that, I think that was very, very foundational for you.
Yeah, it was really foundational. Today I can speak. Why we are doing successful thing is because there is failures, enough of failures.
You came in when there were failures.
True, yes.
Yeah.
There's one thing I wanted you to talk about is, not many people know, and hence, how did ISRO get set up in Bangalore, right? It was not supposed to be. Tell us the story.
It started, Sarabhai, when he started, he was operating from Ahmedabad, the early genesis of space. So he used to live in a physical research laboratory which he created in Ahmedabad. Then came the Tumba Equatorial Rocket Launching Station and Space Science and Technology Center at Tumba at Trivandrum. So these two are essentially the original two big scale work.
This is 1960s, right?
Yes, 60s. So PRL was more into scientific research of standing atmosphere, but the rocket and satellite development was starting only in Tumba. Then satellite development was reached some level, and Professor Rao was working in Tumba at that time. So when the Aryapata satellite building was supposed to happen, an opportunity to launch in Russia came, he moved all of that work to Pinia Industrial Estate in Bangalore.
Why so?
Because Professor Rao was leader. He was from Bangalore.
Okay.
He was fascinated to come to Bangalore, hopefully.
No, and I think there was some engineering capability.
Possibly,
Penia.
yes.
Because you had all the PSUs
BL
here.
and everything.
Penia was the one industrial town. We could have sourced inputs, whereas Trivandrum was not that much industrial at that time. Possibly, his thought process, I do not know what it was, but he was successful in identifying that possibility and bring to Penia and establish the entire manufacturing of satellite here. So the satellite center came here. But the real headquarters of ISRO came to Bangalore because of a different reason. That was when after Sarabhai's demise, which was operating from Ahmedabad at that time, then a new chairman was identified as Satish Dhawan. But Satish Dhawan was the director of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. But he was doing his research work at Caltech in USA at that time.
Right.
So he was asked by Srimati Indira Gandhi to take over the chairmanship because he was inducted into Space Commission by Sarabhai before that. So it was well known that he was familiar with the space program. Then he said that I will come back only after finishing my work. So Indira Gandhi agreed, but he also put a condition that I will continue as director of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and also secretary or chairman of ISRO afterwards. So that also was agreed, and for him the headquarters was shifted to Bangalore. So he said that, and that an office was set up in Bangalore near Majestic area. A hired area was taken, and the headquarters of ISRO was set up there. So it is Satish Dhawan who brought it to the Bangalore. But of course, Satish Dhawan is not from Bangalore. He is a Kashmir,
Yeah, so it is a little bit of UR Rao first and Satish Dhawan.
Satish Dhawan next, so it's okay. But then, IISc has a role to play in all of this. The space ecosystem and Indian Institute of Science are very, very connected. The C.V. Raman and his students were Vikram Sarabhai as well as Homi Bhabha. I think you would have seen that story.
Yes.
So they were in Bangalore, so they were connected to Bangalore in some way or the other.
So IISc
has the original research work on space, in many areas in aerodynamics, flight dynamics. Of course, the creation of HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, the National Aerospace Laboratory here in Bangalore. So the space and aerospace ecosystem was getting formed in and around Bangalore. And Satish Dhawan was, of course, he was fascinated by the flight and aircraft and things like that. So naturally, Bangalore became the hub of space and aerospace activity in that country. And space, no better place than Bangalore to start as a headquarters.
What was ISRO like as a workplace, the work culture, when you joined as a young man there?
Not very exciting to start with. The reason is simple, that it was more of a government job. And salaries were very, very less. Look at the salaries at that time. I still remember my first month's salary was 1,800 rupees.
Wow.
Okay.
And it was supposed to be big amount, right?
It was not big amount.
For the outside world in the 80s?
it was still not big amount.
Relative to the private industry.
See, related, even your living standards were not great for anyone who was working there. And of course, the failures were happening. And people were slowly 1980s, 5 to 90s period was the starting of the IT boom.
Yeah, there were so many opportunities.
And opportunities were slowly developing outside, and people were interested to move out. And even I still remember my college mates were telling me, don't join ISRO. You are much more capable to work in a private ecosystem. They were telling me, really, because I was good at college. I was leading some things, and I was considered to be a good leader to handle complex tasks. But then I had a passion of going. I was so much interested to join space program. So I stuck to this because of many reasons. The reasons were, though we had failures and issues, but the people in the system was fantastic, I must tell you.
Anybody you want to remember?
I like to say many people. One of them is my immediate boss, who was Mr. Janardhan, And next, his boss, Mr. Ramakrishnan, who later became the director of Aerospace and who was my mentor for so many years, almost 20 years. I also started writing civil service examination, inspired by many people around me. And he came to know about it. And he will never tell, don't write, but every day he will come and tell me, why you are writing such examinations? You look at the work which you are doing here. It's of great technical value. You are developing rockets, you are developing this and that. If you become an IAS officer, you will at the best become a PA to a minister. And why you want to take such jobs? No, he will tell such psychological, small things.
It worked.
Yeah. Then he will ensure that I am always tasked with a lot of responsibility. Give me tasks again and again and again, so that I don't have free time to do any other studies. And he will ensure that I won't take leave. He will play all those tricks on me to make sure that I won't write or win the. But I still, pass my prelims. I wrote my mains, but I narrowly missed time to go for interview. But after that, I came back to office and I told him that I am not making this time. He immediately congratulated. Congratulations that you are not leaving us. So that was the type of bosses I had.
So ISRO that you joined in the 80s and ISRO that you left today, as an organization, as a culture, as a government outfit, you think it has changed?
See, it happened because of some of the later successes that we achieved. The first and foremost I must attribute to the rocket called PSLV, which has clocked almost 50 plus launches now. So now we have a rocket of our own, which is very reliable and can take any payloads. And because of the rocket PSLV, we had all the communication satellites, remote sensing satellites, even the Chandrayaan 1 achieved using that single rocket. I think that changed everything. Now people look at us as if, okay, when you launch a rocket, it is most likely to succeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is one thing. Second, of course, it has made impact in the applications. Our satellites started giving images and information, climate and weather.
So there's a lot to show.
A lot of areas that it's covered in the last 25 years, 30 years of time. And it created some impact in the society to show, yes, whatever money that you are spending in space is now bringing in some benefits. Then the second aspect is of inspirational part of it. Once we do missions to moon, missions to Mars, all this creates within the minds of young people. Yeah, here is one country which you thought will not do such high-tech work, is capable of doing it and demonstrating. I think that has changed the entire narrative now. I think people feel inspired by the work which we do in ISRO.
So you had a string of successes, and then suddenly Chandrayaan 2 happened. And was that a little bit of a rude shock?
I don't think so. See, it's the whole narrative that you outside world makes. And we people in ISRO realizes that the failure can happen any moment, any time in the mission. In Chandrayaan 2, it was mostly, everything worked very well except for the last phase of the mission. And you imagine that you're reaching up to moon, capturing on the moon, bringing the orbit down to that point, and then landing somewhere there that you have a glitch which caused that thing to miss that target. It's okay as a technology, but for a nation, it's not okay that you have not achieved the final target. So, but then when we went into that much later and then corrected all that in Chandrayaan 3 and achieved success. Of course, at that time, all of us were depressed because outside world looks at it as as a failure. For us, it is definitely a success because we learned so many things.
But how did you internally kind of manage that process and deal with it?
Handling failure is something that we learn within the system. You are not hearing most of the failures because they are internal to the system.
Do you want to talk about a failure we don't know, but internally you guys were in turmoil?
I got tens of failures. Now we see every day some test that doesn't go through very well. And that happens on a continuous basis. And every failure we need to study, understand, and make corrections and go to the next step. And this happens in subsystem development, major system development, tests. For every rocket, engines are developed, for example. And one engine development undergoes hundreds of tests. For example, the cryogenic engine we developed went through 180 tests of major tests. And every test must be successful. And some of them will go through, definitely have some failure or anomalies. So when I became project director of GSLV Mark III, the second stage of the rocket called L110 had just a failure in the test stand. It was tested and there was a huge fire. It destroyed the engine and the whole stage. then I had the task of correcting it and making it successful. So it was one of the major failures of the rocket which I developed. I was a project director. And in that development itself, I would have seen at least some 10, 15 failures of major failures during development process. Handling that failure, and every day you need to solve the problem, no? And then go to the next step. Decisions are to be taken, what to do next.
So is there an SOP that you have of dealing with failures? Because it's not just you, but so many people in the organization, you may have internalized at a senior leadership level. How do you deal with them?
One good part of is that once failure or anything occurs, the team becomes very cohesive and strong. It's not actually the other way. We find within the organization it's really fantastic, and people won't even go home. If there is a failure, they will stay there.
What was that night like? That Chandrayaan 2, the failure, the head of ISRO on public TV, Mr. Modi coming and comforting him. What was it like inside ISRO?
No, we don't feel that type of, what you see outside emotional. We are into the reason.
Yeah.
Okay, we are probing the reason. We are looking at the data. The data need to be seen. What exactly has gone wrong? Create some hypothesis. What could have gone wrong? Unfortunately, we don't know why it failed. The entire interest of the team is to find out how it failed, why it failed. So for that, we are looking at threats and reasons so that we can explain to someone. So each team engaged in doing this. Then we will have reviews. Night itself, we will take reviews. We will call each team. What is your assessment? What is your assessment? Each one will come and tell, I am good, I am good, I am good. But then no one is able to identify what exactly went wrong. I have seen that every time a failure happens, the energy actually increases to find out what went wrong.
One question more on this before we move on. So typically when a failure happens, there is a scapegoat, person responsible for the failure. And typically in organizations, you do see this scapegoat blame game happening. What happens at ISRO?
Ultimately, we are a government organization. No, a scapegoat has to be found out. So now I am telling you this truth. I was secretary. There was a failure of one of the rocket, SSLV. Government asked me to identify why it happened and who that, and take action. I wrote the government that there is no one like that. See, the whole decisions are taken by everyone, and it is not by one person. A collective way of decision making is in the system, and we take inputs from hundreds of people, and a decision is taken, and no one is single-handedly responsible for any of this success or even failure. So that way, I can't say because of this fellow there is a failure. It's not possible. And government doesn't understand. I said we stick to that stand, that for technical activities, it is of always a collective decisions, and we are in a non-hierarchical system. Everyone can ask a question, everyone can debate an issue. So in such a system, there is no scapegoat. And we never identified a single one in none of the failure as a scapegoat.
And what's the typical team size for one of these missions?
So I'll example, when I started, the PSLV project was 80 people. The entire organization is 17,000 people. The PSLV whole project was actually executed by at least 2,000 people. But the project
team,
is
the core
80
team is 80 people.
When I was a project director of GSLV Mark III, the size further shrunk. It was only 40. So we were much better organized. So we don't need that many people. So the project is very small.
I think this leads me to this other, I guess, USP. Of course, culturally, it has been a lower cost organization because of it not being a private organization in one sense. Are there any other things that you attribute to the innovation cycles being more frugal and cost effective? I
believe there are many reasons. First thing is the culture. It's very, very important. Internally, once you come into the organization, there is always an internal feeling money is not plenty. Budget allocations have always been very...
Does that constrain you, this scarcity?
It's a feeling of scarcity always inside.
No, but scarcity, like we have seen many things even in other countries, I think it leads to...
better way of doing it.
Better way of doing it, and new innovations that were never imagined. Right?
There is never plenty of money. There are budget, of course, good budget, but it's not lavish budget. So the only option is that you need to project a lower number. For example, if I had told it will cost you 1,500 crores to go to moon, probably that approval will never come. So we will put 400 crores. So
And we'll figure it out.
we'll figure it out. What is the number which is likely to attract the government to give me a sanction? So we start from that really. So that means you need to frame the whole project's framework, the type of work that you know, development cost, how do you source material, everything we'll have to plan in a manner that fits into this budget.
Yeah.
So it's always like that. So this is learned internally, how to write projects and how to do things in a manner that you reuse, anything that after testing you don't throw away. In fact, I have been trained to do many things in somehow recondition.
So there's reusability built at the very core of
it's very much in the core. In fact, some of the tested hardware I have sent it to industries, corrected and drawn and flown also. Never ever done now in any other industries, very rarely done. So we have a culture of that. Second is we work with industries, and the bargain of contracts is always very, very, very rigorous to make sure that we get it at a very lowest offer, very reasonable
maybe
cost.
this you can explain a little bit more in terms of the ecosystem that we don't hear too much about the ecosystem that has built around that supports these launches and projects.
We started this working with industries way back when Kalam started the SLV3. The first time that we started building a rocket in industries. At that time, 1970s, 80s, there was no industry to build anything. At that time, we went out and started talking to many of them. They set up machine tools, manufacturing bases, chemical plants to support ISRO. And it was more of inspiration. We have a national program of rocket building. Why don't you come and contribute? And so many people came to start at work, created their own businesses to support ISRO.
How many companies typically participate in one project?
Today, there are around 450 companies, industries, small, big, medium. Some of them are manufacturers, some of them are standard item suppliers, some of them are sourcing and such activities, logistic partners.
And with ISRO, they've been growing in numbers as well as scale, their sizes?
Some of them not. And some of them scaled big because they had more contracts of various kinds. One example is interesting, fasteners, nuts, bolts, screws. Yeah. When I joined ISRO, I was using, I'm an integration engineer. I joined as an integration engineer. So my job was to assemble rockets and plan for assembly of rockets. So we used a lot of fasteners. We had to design with a lot of fasteners. And all fasteners were coming from US, UK, France. And we took an action to build it in India. Aerospace quality. Space quality is not like the ordinary screws of which high-strung materials and precision manufacturing. And we talked to some of the industries in India and they established their facilities, plants. We worked on a metallurgist or manufacturing specialist, worked with them to make a high-quality fastener. Then coatings, lubrication, and many other technologies had to be developed. Today, I can tell you, entire fasteners required for space program, aerospace program is made in India today because of our work with industries. And they are the leading exporters of the world today. Today, you are flying in Airbus and Boeing aircrafts, you're taking off from here. Most of the bolts that are inside are made in India.
Oh, wow.
So I think for advanced manufacturing, this ability to import substitute and get a little bit of early critical mass from that and build capability and then export to the rest of the world, I think is a playbook. I think
this is one example. I think similar, a lot of examples are there, but there are more to be created. More examples are to be created. We have been working with many industries to indigenize and make it in India to support us. Today, I can tell you, almost 85% of the rocket parts are made in India using our own materials. Some part is still being imported, especially electronics and components and chips.
Is there a lot of fungibility? A lot of components for space are also used in aerospace, right?
Bangalore is now a very good hub for manufacturing aerospace ecosystem. Yeah. Exactly same capacity for rockets also. And satellite
so one
also.
Area that we had discussed long back, and I wanted to ask you that Bangalore's as a manufacturing ecosystem and the cost going up and them moving away from the center of the city to further and further on the periphery. How is that ecosystem sort of evolving geographically?
It doesn't matter, in my opinion, because of course, city grows.
Of course.
But the availability of skilled people to do this type of work won't be available in the cities now. Because the class of people living in city or the class of people who are working in that type of industries are different. So the cost of maintaining such industries will become extremely high within the core of this city. So it is better to be in peripheral towns. It is a natural change that will happen. All manufacturing ecosystem, once being inside the city, need to move out. For example, HAL was the manufacturing hub once. It was in the periphery of the city once. Today it's in the heart of the city. So you can't shift it. Because of that, it got trapped inside. So it happens.
Globally, if you look at and who do you benchmark against? Typically all of us want to benchmark ourselves vis-a-vis somebody, and considering our frugality, where we are in our journey, space journey, as ISRO chairman, who would you look at? Would Elon Musk, SpaceX, NASA, who would you look at for learning curve, for benchmarking?
We are very unique and no one to compare. For this much of money and this much of resources and knowledge, can you do the outcome of this class? I think it is very difficult. For example, our budget allocation annually is $1.8 billion US dollars. Okay, approximately. The budget allocation announced for US is 50 billion. It could be much higher. Okay, look at China. Their allocation is in the outside is maybe about tens of billion dollars. Europe has about 4 billion US dollars. Russia, something like 3 billion USD. So this is the type of allocation. Japan is again around 3 billion USD. And number of launches, if you compare, Japan doesn't even launch that many. Japan is technically very advanced nation. They also have rockets and satellites. You look at their launch frequency, the successes, the missions that are undertaken. Compared to the 1.9 billion US dollar budget attack, it's very difficult to do similar things by anyone with this type of budget allocation. And then look at the technology availability. Where are the industries in India? For example, if you look at Japan, there is a Mitsubishi industry, which is one of the very high-end industry, and they are building the rockets. It is not the JAXA which is building the rocket. They are subcontracted the entire rocket building to the company called Mitsubishi, and they are building it within the company. And it is a national launch. And if you look at US, you see Lockheed Martin, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, all of them are already established space players. They have aircraft engines, they are manufacturing capability, they have businesses of much higher magnitude other than space. And they are doing space as one of their small venture. And they can always place an order on any of these companies and do things. But if you look at India, there is no one really in India to do anything of this class. And there is no industry capable of building a rocket engine. There is no one capable of building a satellite. And everything has to be done by one organization called ISRO. Design, sourcing, manufacturing, the testing, assembly, launching, and this single entity. And it's not the case with NASA. NASA is not doing it directly. And they are only subcontracting to industries. Of course, they are supervising, they are directing, they have research laboratories. But building and launching is not done by them. So the ecosystem is entirely different. And I can't compare. I don't see anywhere similar. Even Europe, you look at Europe, it is again spread out ecosystem. There is Ariane group, which is responsible for the launchers, and national space programs, which is distributed across. French has one, Germany has one, DLR, CNES, and all of them have small budgets. Russia is again different, more centrally managed and controlled. But they have a huge ecosystem already created over the Cold War era. They have created a massive infrastructure. We don't have anything. So if you really look at the ecosystem we have created, if you see scale, nothing is there really other than few laboratories. And from nothing we are able to do this much.
The other area that ISRO has really pioneered is the role of women, movement towards women in leadership roles, or is that something that has...
It's not in my time, it has always been there.
And if I can add, how did you make that happen? Because corporate India is struggling with women, diversity, all that, and ISRO seems to have done a fantastic job of it.
It happened because there was always thrust on it. Basically in the recruitment, we even put advertisement that women are encouraged to apply.
This was from the early days?
From the early days, yes.
And why would you do that?
It has an advantage in many areas because you need focused attention and concentration in work, and women are better suited for it. Okay. In the domain of design, in terms of software, simulation, all those areas. Of course, there are domains which they won't excel as much. But then there are strengths and weaknesses for each of the gender. So that is one side of it. But then generally we get women plenty, and in recent times their numbers are much better. Earlier, engineers, scientists women were not plenty available. I had in my class also there were only 3 girls. Rest of us were all boys.
What's the ratio in ISRO today?
Now around 25%.
25% is
Yeah.
And many missions are headed by women, I'm told.
There are project
right?
directors,
Yeah.
direct deputy directors.
Yeah.
Of course, one director is there, one lady is there. Director means next to chairman, I know.
Yeah, but anything that you've done as a policy, organizational level policy that has helped, enabled you to nurture them?
The first and important policy is that we have a promotional policy and a recognition. We need to promote people. In the promotion, it is not based on years spent, unlike other government departments. Bureaucratic promotions are always time linked. You this many years after that you get promoted. But in ISRO, it's not happening like that. It's based on performance. You have an internal assessment and performance. But of course, you need to have some time cross. After that, you will evaluate your performance, your outcome. And if it is good, you are getting promoted. In that, we give a lot of consideration for women. Women go through, their personal life is little different than men, especially marriages, childbearing, and all creates disturbance to their career. So we may make sure that it's not loaded on them. In fact, I was some chairman of some of the committees which gave recommendations. How do you handle maternity leave or childcare leave in terms of their performance assessment? If they are away from office for 1 year sometimes, so there is no outcome. So their promotion can get affected. So we made rules that it won't affect. It has to be accepted that this is part of their life and you need to grant an exemption for such things. Doesn't mean that they are inferior in any way, because they are constrained to contribute because of such tasks. So once you give such allowances, they will not have in the career progression, they will not be affected. But I am not telling it is true for everyone. Some people, women definitely have disadvantage because of this issue.
How would you look back at your legacy as you look back at your stint at ISRO through the 1980s and till now, but of course at the helm of it?
As a designer of the rocket, I was more passionate about design and making things and systems. So this was, I concentrated all the time, not really into the post of chairman came much later, but I was a director of a center, liquid propulsion system center, as well as Aerospace center, which were the hub of activity in terms of design, especially multidisciplinary design and working with teams to finally make a launch. So at least I am very proud that at least 3 rockets I had direct hand-on to design and develop. One of them is called Launch Vehicle Mark III, which launched the Chandrayan 3, which I was a project director. Then the small satellite launch vehicle, which I conceived and developed. Then recently the test vehicle, which is the Gaganyaan test vehicle. And many others which are already started, but that will happen in the days to come, like the NGLV. So these were my personal contribution. But then in the position as a Secretary Department of Space and Chairman, I had many great things I must talk about. One, of course, is the reform that we brought in, where private people are now given a lot of responsibilities to work in space.
2019.
The policy changes, which was important. What government wanted that policy to come, but make it happen requires a lot of intervention of various kinds. Creating policies, making the policy announcement, the FDA policy we announced. Then we brought in the geospatial policy, working with the Department of Science and Technology. Created in space and made it very fully active so as to help the non-governmental entities. Of course, I got a lot of approvals in the government, like the continuation of Chandrayan projects, missions to Mars and Venus, building space station, Gaganyaan program extension, and large number of satellites, which recently we would have got at least 50-60 satellites got approved by the government to build. And in that, at least 30 of them are going to be built by private for ISRO's use. I think this is the first time. And significant private commercial launches we undertook, like the launches for OneWeb, which we did almost 72 satellites we launched. And we made most of the activities moved from ISRO to industry. So our rocket building and launches are now moved to industry. Industry is producing now, contracted to industry. Satellites are no longer owned by ISRO. We have moved it to our PSU called NSIL. They are owning all the satellites and operating on a commercial basis. So they are making profit now. Earlier it was operated by government. Now government is not operating it. So no money is spent from government side. Everything is based on the revenue model. It has now started operating. There is another model which is called the demand-based building. So now no longer government funds building satellites. All satellites are built by the money that is coming from the user. Suppose somebody wants a satellite, the money has to be sourced. Then you have to build a satellite and launch. So government expenditure on space has come down because of that. But the scale of operation has not come down because we have a different economic model now to work on it. All these changes happened in the last 3 years.
And you had a separate entity which built these satellites for global organizations, right?
We have called NSIL, New Space India Limited. They take commercial activity. They are building satellites. For example, last 2-3 months back, they launched a satellite called GSAT-20, which was built for Tata Play. Tata Play is our TV channel broadcaster. So for them, the satellite is built and launched, which is almost 1,200 crores project. It was built by ISRO and industry and launched by SpaceX launched it.
SpaceX launched that, yeah.
So we have a different model of working. It is not just government gives money and we build and launch. No, we are looking at it in a commercial way of operating it.
So why don't we dive into the privatization, right, and the bid which 2019 and startups and many of those things have happened. One is the role of ISRO and how that is going to evolve going forward, what it did before 2019 and post privatization. And maybe Prashanth can dive into more the startup and what it would do to the startup ecosystem as well.
See, the new policy, Space Policy 2023, talks about this very, very clearly. ISRO is the National Space Agency and their job is to do research and bring out new technology to the table for everyone to use. Everyone means for ISRO as well as private use. So the money is funded by government. No? So the public money is used to develop research outcome, and research outcome shall not be confined to ISRO. It should be made public. So this is a very important policy statement. That means if you are an startup and you want technology, ISRO is bound to give it to you. So this change has happened now. So you can seek a technology from ISRO if you want, but at a cost. The license cost will have to pay, but technology development is responsible of ISRO. And ISRO should not become an operational agency. And it means building and launching rocket, building and launching satellite is no longer ISRO's responsibility. It is responsibility of the public sector undertaking called NSIL, New Space India Limited. They should fund their own fund, build a rocket and satellite and launch. Government will not give money. Money for research will be given, but money for production will not be given.
So, and where does NSIL get its money from, funds from?
Public money.
Okay, this is the Tata example that you gave.
They have to source money from banks or from their own resources, so they have to borrow and then build a satellite and launch it.
Based on commercial
terms.
So startups, of course, in 10 years we have gone from no startups to now 200, 250. Still, the amount of funding is very small. It's about $80 to $100 million per year, which is very small compared to what the ecosystem requires. But I think one of the capabilities that ISRO brings is the ability for these startups to leverage a lot of the investment and capabilities that have happened through the years. So how did you open that up, and how have you been able to catalyze the startups through the capabilities at ISRO?
The whole approach of startup is in the innovation, which is the new ideas and how you can make use of the knowledge in space to do something different. But then they seek some technology from ISRO. Sometimes a sensor, sometimes a material, sometimes a product which is difficult for them to do. Now we give such support. Second type of support is in terms of laboratory usages. For example, they need to do testing. For example, vibration testing or thermo vacuum testing, environmental testing. To create such a facility costs you hundreds of crores. So use that facility.
Use that, right? I mean, that can be huge for startups.
For a nominal cost. Then also consultancy. For example, they need advices on how to proceed, how to do design, how to make it space worthy.
Right.
That requires skill and experience.
So do you actually get into a commercial consultancy contract with startups?
We have not yet done. What we do is we do an informal way of consultancy now.
Got it.
One is retired people. So we have put a pool of retired people put in the website, okay, this many people are available for you for consultancy in private
Right.
with this type of domain expertise, and this is done by InSpace. So we call all application from retired people who have
They can be part of
they
InSpace
can
and
part
people
of
can
InSpace
tap
and,
into InSpace.
and we also employed some of the retired people in InSpace for free consultancy.
Right.
They can take consultants from these people but don't have to pay anything. So that's also available. You can also take a paid consultancy if the people have become full-timers. So that also is given.
Yeah. So talking about the opportunity space itself, the whole space domain in the US is about 250 billion in size in the industry. Definitely a large opportunity for Indian startups to go after. If you had to bucket that into 2-3 different areas, building of these small satellites, which seems to be a very fertile space, the situational awareness and the sensor space, the propulsion systems separately. So what are some of the other areas, and maybe even throw light on some of these areas where you see opportunities for Indian startups?
Now, if you look at space, what exactly are satellites for? Finally, you need to build a rocket to put a satellite up there, and satellite need to do some functionality. And the functionalities are, one, of course, is communication. Communication is one of the important functions. So relaying messages. Second is imaging. Look at and then take signals from the space and image. Third is in terms of providing some of the complex form of this imaging, plus like a GPS, like PNT services, position navigation and timing services, IoT services. Your question is integrating them and doing them in a better manner.
Right.
So the ideas from the new startups are come up in that side. The classical way of
these are for both defense and commercial.
Defense and commerce, both. So they are looking at how we can make more agile satellites. For example, one of the questions which everyone asks is how to improve the revisit. Taking images. ISRO has been building satellites, but he has been taking images. But you take image one area, after 2 weeks you come back and image the same area.
Right.
So your revisits are typically 2 weeks.
Right.
And today we want it in hours.
Yeah,
we want to see in every 15 minutes how things change.
So the number of satellites
become more. And if you're how to put a large number of satellites to do this cost effectively, there comes the concept of very compact payloads, smaller satellites and constellation concepts, intra-satellite communication, edge computing. Now all this comes into that domain. So new players are working in those areas. For example, they are looking at how to create a very compact optical observation capability. Then how to put a compact edge computing so that you don't actually stream entire data. You only take what is the change alone and send it. So they have built some edge computing tools. Some of them are building an inter-satellite communication, so you don't have to put all the ground stations there. Otherwise, for every satellite, you need a ground station.
Yes.
Which is too much costly.
Yeah.
So then you are looking at algorithms, how to work in a constellation operation, which is more autonomous than manual control. So the innovations are happening in all these domains. So, and then building electronics, which is much more compact, how to make a more compact ASICs, which will have functionality, which is more packed. So one is a traditional way of doing things in the classical way. This is a different way of approach.
So when you compare the business of building rockets and launching to these satellites, looks like the business of creating these various applications around these new form factors that are there in satellites is slightly faster to market than building launch vehicles.
Fundamentally, the investments and gestation period for rockets are 5+ years. For satellites, it is 1 year typically. It can be 1+ depending upon the complexity. Because for satellites, now kits are available. It's only what innovation that you want to build, that alone you can develop. The rest of them are all available. You can purchase and integrate.
Like you said, it's in the imaging or communication, very specific.
That alone you concentrate. But let all the peripheral elements, propulsion, inertial navigation, electronics, communication, all that, solar panels, power, batteries, all are available. You can buy them and kit them together to build a satellite. But not for rockets. No kits are available. For rockets, you have to develop from the basics. Engines are not available, hardwares are not available. So it takes long years for the rocket development. That's why developing rockets in private is a huge challenge generally, and huge risks and failures, as I said.
Yeah. Because
success in a satellite comes much easier because you can test it again and again and again and then make sure it do work.
Yeah.
Rocket, possibility for testing also.
Right.
So when you launch it only, it is getting tested. So any errors, mistakes made manifest as a failure. And the ability of the companies to handle failures is depending upon their financial strength. So if they have 2-3 failures in series, I think the companies will have serious problem. So these are the issues which prevents many companies to work in rockets, prevent them. But when satellites, we can have more companies.
Yeah, for a SpaceX to happen from India, and the idea of reusability of rockets, I'm sure that's an area that I think you started that journey in. How many years of research you feel is still required for us to launch something like that from India?
Now, when I was in ISRO as a director of LPSC, I started this program of working on a reusable rocket development. We call Admire. It was a name given also.
Admire.
So it requires fundamentally a throttleable engine, an engine, liquid engine, which can be thrust can be varied. Without that, you cannot land. So that program we started, and it is currently available. That engine is available. So using that rocket only, we have recently did a Gaganyaan abort test. So that rocket is now going to be the test demonstrator for proving the landing technology. But that is only technology demonstration. But an operational reusable rocket is now recently approved by government, called the new NGLV, Next Generation Launch Vehicle, which is going to use a LOX methane engine, throttleable plus reusable, etc. So my hope is that in another 5-6 years of time, we will have a reusable rocket, like the one which you talk about, SpaceX, no?
Yeah,
similar
but
one.
And you think through some industrial or commercial startup participation, some of this can be accelerated?
I don't think so. The startup ecosystem has not yet grown to that level, can handle rocket development yet. And I am hoping that they will come.
They will get there. Yeah.
But at this moment, I think they are not. They can become partner in this at this moment, learn this and grow along with this, and take the responsibility to build it and operate it at a later time. I think I am hoping that to happen. If some industries come and join this building right at the big conceptual level itself, they can grow along with it. So we have proposed to government also a model like that. You fund us for R&D, but allow us to partner with an industry right away, so that they are part of it, to learn along with it. Next 5-6 years, they will learn with no financial burden on them. And at the end of it, they can take on the production. By the time, they will hoping that they will have the capacity to learn and do it on their own.
Because you have enough capability, research capability within ISRO, not very unlike NASA, right, today. And so you have an opportunity for a private startup to be able to partner and, hopefully close the gap over a period of time now through this collaboration.
Yes, that's precisely the model that we propose for NGLV. An industrial partner or industrial consortium will be integrated with the development process. And they will build it along with us, learn that, create capacity within the organization of theirs to understand it. Right. Because rocket technology requires at least hundreds of domains expertise. And this expertise must be available in-house. It's not a production work. Every day you need to have that domain knowledge to handle deficiencies, issues, snacks, etc. and take a decision to proceed. If you don't have internal experts, you cannot launch it. So that challenge requires a lot of investment and a lot of money to be spent on experts. So assume a company, you have 1,000 residential experts for operating a rocket which can be operated by 100 people. But you need 1,000 people at the back to advise you to make sure it will work.
And that's the power of
That's
ISRO,
the power of the knowledge. Yeah. That's needed.
And which is very unique.
Yeah.
And I think, see, if you look at any other frontier spaces globally, I think the gap in these, what I call as hard spaces. Hard spaces are where it's just not software, it's just not electronics, it's just not advanced manufacturing. I mean, your capability to be able to integrate and bring all of this together, I think is where a nation gets tested in terms of its future capabilities. And
now, if I take an example in other nations also, you see the same model. No, see, even if you look at Elon Musk also, it's not really a private. No, you should understand. Yeah. It is a NASA supported organization with there is enough of expertise from there, with the government sponsored facilities which has been created. Even in Europe, you look at the Ariane program, it's a agency supported program. The Ariane group development, CNES, and is very much part of it. National space agencies in participation is very important, and the maintenance of that knowledge by the government funding
Yes.
becomes important
Yes.
to keep that knowledge intact.
As we talk about the future, what are some of the big milestones? And it's in public domain, but we would still love to hear from you. Big milestones that ISRO and our own space pursuit we have set up for ourselves.
I think recently Prime Minister Modi ji has announced a lot of things. One of them
Yes.
is the Space Vision 2047. The first time in the history of space program, not a short-term vision, a long-term vision has been announced. I think this is something I think we must all be very proud of. After the Chandrayaan 3 success, I think there has been enough of enthusiasm and energy in the system that government was very happy to come forward and approve such programs. I'll give you some highlight of it. Of course, the bigger highlight is that we must have an ability to launch an Indian on the moon by 2040 and bring him back. No, that is a goal that you have set. But to do that, we don't have capacity today. We don't have a rocket, we don't have a program which will take human beings to moon. But that has to be developed over a period of time. Second is, to make it happen, we must have a space station in between. By 2028, 35, we must build an Indian space station called Bharati Antariksh Station now. So that has to be achieved using the present rockets. So it's the second program. Third program is a rocket is to be developed which can actually take human beings to moon. The current rockets are incapable of doing it. Current rocket can lift at least only 10 tons. We need 100-ton capable rocket. So a bigger, massive rocket we have to develop, like the Saturn they did. But that model will not work. We have a different model. So that project is called NGLV project. That is also approved. Then if you have to go to moon in 2040, going to moon must continue from now. Chandrayaan 3 is the last moon mission. Then next mission cannot be 2040 manned mission. We must have continuous missions to moon so as to gain a knowledge in various technologies. So we recently got approval for Chandrayaan 4, Chandrayaan 5, and possibly later we'll get further approval so that we step by step graduate ourselves to understand how to go to moon and come back. So along with that, we got approval for Venus mission, we got an approval for Mars landing mission, and like that.
How much do you think would be a ballpark number that we would need to put in to be able to?
If you have to go and land on the moon and come back, we need minimum of around 2 lakh crores of rupees. And that is to be spent in next 20 years. So it's not a huge money. I think you should not be scared by the number. 2 lakh crore is not large. See, our defense budget today is 4 lakh crores annually. Okay. And I am talking about 2 lakh crores money to be spent in next 20 years for a moon landing program. So it's not huge. It is all distributed over a period of time. And if you spend that, what you have is not the man on the landing on the moon, is not the outcome. Outcome is, along this path, we are going to develop so much of capability. We are going to have rockets which will have high capacity. We will be building many missions to understand science and technology. We will be developing laboratories to do space stations building and space, microgravity, environment research. We will be developing human space capsule capability over a period of time, and many things will get developed. And finally, leading up to a man landing on the moon. So, should be seen as a growth of an ecosystem, business, economic outcome, leading to that as a goal. Okay. So, I believe this investment will return in a different way. It will come back to us.
So maybe tell us a little bit more on the first immediate next thing, which is the manned mission.
The first is, of course, is a Gaganyaan. All of you know.
Gaganyaan, and then the
space station.
The space station.
Yeah. Gaganyaan, of course, has been going on for some time. It's already 5 years into the program. Hopefully, the manned mission will take place by 2027. This year, I believe it's going to be the unmanned mission. The rocket is undergoing integration now. So, possibly by the second half of this year, the launch will take place. Then, similar launches will have, unmanned missions will continue.
Why do you think that is important, besides the optics of it?
See, it's important because we have no experience of flying to a human being to space yet, other than Rakesh Sharma.
Yes.
And that he flew in a Russian craft many years back. So his experience is available to us in terms of his interaction. So when we do Gaganyaan program, we seek his opinion. He is a part of our review committees and discussions for etc. So he tells us how he understand the crew module design. So the new crafts which the Americans fly are different from the Russian craft. The safety system has changed. The electronics has, see, for example, Russian craft had all mechanical devices to control. Today, the Crew Dragon is all touch screen. Just for example, the suit is different, the environmental control system is different, the communication interface is different. There were no videos at that time to transmit to and see. So everything has changed. The protocols for training has changed. So we need experience of people who will actually fly to human missions and come back and tell us, this is our experience, this is what we saw, and our designs will become better. So I believe that we need not one, actually we need more people to go to space at any cost. If somebody is willing to take our people, let them go. I think we need to be ready to spend that much of money to make our program successful.
What would be your advice to your successor at ISRO, Mr. Narayanan?
Say there is a mechanism of advice in our system, and we seek that advice on a regular basis, and that prerogative of choosing the advice is the present chairman's responsibility. And we do it. We have been doing it. When I was chairman, we called our previous chairman whenever there is a need for an advice, and we all go there. So there are conditions where we need such advice. For example, we want to make a change in the program. The human spaceflight program, in his opinion, is not going right. It needs a midway correction in this direction. He will make a plan himself and will present to former chairman and seek our views. And we will give our view, and finally he will take a decision. The responsibility to take a decision is always the present.
We have spoken about the role of space in communication, agriculture, so many areas, but we didn't touch upon defense. And this is an area that as common people, we just don't interact and speak about too much. So I thought it'll be interesting to get your perspective on, as a country that is now going to the next frontier of how defense warfare is evolving and the need for situational awareness. You know, countries have 200, 300 satellites. So just your sense on, as a country, you know, how important is the space program for defense?
In fact, I would like to add, so recently we read about 10 satellites which played a very important role in helping India in this India-Pakistan sort of flare-ups of battle that happened. And clearly, space is an area where a lot of these battles will be fought and won. US, China, Israel, some of these countries have invested massively. One, help us get a sense of these 10 satellites and the role that today it is, and going forward, what, as Prashanth was saying, the role it will play in our defense.
The importance of space for defense has been understood very well now, though we have been talking about it for quite a long time, and the world has been talking about it, but it has been demonstrated very well in the recent, some of the conflicts. For example, the Ukraine conflict, it has shown it very well how it played a role even at the other Asian, European area domains which is happening, and recently in India also. And it has a potential to scale up significantly. One or two of the studies which are recently done on domains of space applications, it is very surprising to see the more than 50% of the space-based applications will be in defense. That means the entire satellites which will be used for any of the applications, more than 50% is likely to be in defense. And when it is say defense, it is going to be state funded. So it changes the entire narrative of the economy of space system, in which the state funded defense activity for space is going to be the most dominant expender for space program. So this is one study that indicates it. So it shows the growing influence of space in defense. Why is it happening? That is the first, because you should also understand the conflicts are of various kinds now. Earlier, you need to have troops moving and conquering land, and then now that's no longer the case now. Very rarely, maybe it comes at much later phase of when you have to occupy some place and control of it. It comes. But many of the conflicts are not in occupation. Many of them are of various different kind. For example, you wage cyber warfare. You are aware of it. Now, wars are fought in that time to create problems and havocs in countries, and then so there is no occupation of anything. It's only neutralizing some capabilities. So space has an importance because it gives you a framework of communication, which is very crucial for today's warfare. Second, it gives you a framework for observation. Okay, so these two are becoming important, and of course is the PNT, the positioning and navigation services. So all three has important roles in supporting the missile systems or the defense equipments and logistics. And also another thing which is coming up is the missiles which are not interceptable by the conventional means. For example, the hypersonic missiles is very extremely difficult to intercept using standard technologies. You need a observation which is going to come from other domains. So you need to observe deep into the terrain of other nations. Even before it starts, you need to be aware of. So it started with the radars, or deep powerful radars. But now recently America has announced that they are going to create a 500 satellite constellation for looking at a dome for the American for against missile attack, especially hypersonic missile attack.
What is that? Can you explain that a little?
Dome is nothing but a early warning system and a neutralizing system. So if a missile is coming to your terrain, you should be able to know about its origin, its progress and likely impact point, and you should be able to launch a countermeasure so as to neutralize it before it hits. So you need to be keeping an observation 24/7 in your skies all the time. So earlier what they used to put is radars. All across you put a set of radars.
Yeah, and we have done that in the recent war also.
And when it's not during a conflict time, it comes in a non-conflict time, and this happens during Star Wars time. And such systems were established in Russia and America long back. Today they are being used to observe the space debris. So the Star Wars vanished and no longer you are observing it. But the new threats have come because this is very costly to operate. So they are looking at another methods by which can satellites be an platform. Instead of ground-based observation, put it on a space and then also put kinetic equipments on top of the satellite so that you can utilize the missiles also. So essentially what I am telling is this is going to expand substantially in the coming days. New technologies are going to come, not just imaging some locations, but it's an integrated system is going to come. Slowly they will also house equipments which can neutralize. For example, they can have powerful lasers which can be fired against the missile which is coming from a satellite to kill a missile, not from a ground sometimes. Then the next issue is you have to protect your own satellites, because the satellites are also a war equipment now. You need to, then somebody also will put satellites of similar nature. So they will fight each other in the satellite regime. So instead of the wars will be waged on the war. So there is no end to such concepts. But then very important thing is support from space become essential for all ground equipments now, right, including logistics as well as kinetic equipments which are being launched. So though now coming back to the satellites that we have, India has recognized it many years back and created its own share of it through different channels. And at least we are happy that we have some satellites which are capable of observing the coastal areas and borders, etc. With some amount of capability. Basically, we are looking at what we need versus what we can afford. Both are there. But this recent conflict shows that we need more. Okay, possibly it did serve the purpose, but then in my opinion, it needs more because the forces are looking for more capability. They need a faster revisit and they need images of various kinds, because we are sourcing images from other nations during this conflict also. Not only our satellites, but we had support from other satellites which are commercially available. Everyone can get. So if you are to really become truly independent, we need to have our own. So the number of satellites which are serving this segment has to increase. In my opinion, it is not tens, it is needs in hundreds, because the structure of the satellite, that they are not standing on top of the nation, they are moving around the earth very fast. So once they observe, they go away. So their period of observations are hardly 15 minutes and the next satellite should come immediately to cover that area. And if you have to have such a repeated revisit, the typical constellation will be in hundreds. So we need not only in optical, we need to have night visibility, we need to have thermal imaging, we need to have radar imaging, we need to have multispectral imaging or hyperspectral imaging. So various technology also should come in. So net meaning is that you need hundreds of such satellites to handle.
Hundreds of satellites well equipped.
Well equipped, yeah. And you also have coordination between the satellites. And when you have so many satellites, you get that much of information also. And when that much information comes, you must have a mechanism to analyze that information, give you the essence of it to the people who make on the ground to give decisions. So you need to have intelligence to coming in. For example, AI based tools should run on top of this data to process this data and give information for decisions or actions on the ground to happen. And also must have a network centric control of equipments and based on these inputs. So it's a high technology domain keeping integrating space to ground and operational thing. And you also need people who can handle this. The people in the defense are also not, has to be trained and equipped to handle such complex technologies.
So do you think there will be a new organization that will emerge?
It is already emerging. It's already emerging, and certain things are already, I believe it is already in place. But it need to be expanded. It need to have more, more teeth. It has to have more people, more investment. I believe it will happen.
This is the defense space research.
Yeah, it is not really. They have a defense based space operational team, which is equipped well at this moment to handle what they have. But it has to be scaled, because right now we talk about Navy, Army, Air Force, but space also becomes another entity.
So Air Force probably has asked for being also the space agency, space force of the country, correct?
No, there is a separate group which is handling space, but they will not be the one which is conventional. No, they will be a different type of people.
So one linked question. So if you see space and there is some collaboration happening, like our astronaut will go on a US sort of mission. Do you see any collaboration happening in the defense side? What do you see the future of collaboration and space? With the militarization of space, the future of collaboration,
I think
international,
everybody realizes that space has a dual use. Rockets are missiles. Okay, but their scales are different. The rocket which is used for human space flight will never be becoming a missile. So we know that that scale is different, but for missile the scale is different. So those who are in the domain of work, they understand what exactly are strategic and what exactly are non-strategic. So the type of technology interactions are based on that. Then anyway, any domain has its own, even the satellite technology has influence on defense. So the collaboration, these are very highly controlled and regulated, and is always taken at the highest level of the governments for interaction. For example, if you have to have a technology interaction for a rocket engine discussion, it's always happening at the highest level, Prime Minister level, President's level, only it will happen, and that will be a very strategic decision whether we want to do it or not to do it. So collaboration will do happen, I believe, but then the potential for collaboration is more into the application domain, not into the technology domain. Technology domain is always controlled. No one will share
it's a national interest.
Yeah, no one will share the latest of knowledge. And do you think that there will be technology collaboration? Absolutely not. No one will collaborate on the methods, test facilities, materials. Everywhere there is a great amount of knowledge required to be developed, and even everyone is investing. So space and defense, when I started linking, collaborations will vanish. If you keep civilian space, applications to humanity and services to humanity, if you look at, you can collaborate. I think such collaborations are happening, but the moment you talk about militarization, I think that will be the end of collaboration.
So as we talk about the future potential, young people are looking at this sector for opportunities as a career professional pursuit. One is what are the kind of skills and what kind of opportunities this sector offers for young people in India across the country?
I believe that whatever may be your skill sets, you have an opportunity to work in space. This is one point which I want to say. But the issue is that what exactly you are putting in front of it, and what are the things that you want to do. If you want to enter into a traditional organization like ISRO, the approach is that you must be good in academics, you must get through the engineering or science stream, and you should be able to crack the examination to get into ISRO. But if you want to create a startup or a company in private that you are want to working, you have to have an innovative idea.
Which are the top startups in the space area that we should be watching out for?
I don't know, many people know, but I'll make a bet here that 80% or 90% of them have doctor as the
advisor.
So
please tell us which are the startups we should be looking out
startups
of.
There are good numbers. One, of course, what I know very well are the rocket companies who started at, one is Agnikul, which is at IIT Chennai, started and they are developing a semi-cryogenic liquid engine based rocket. The Skyroot, which is at Hyderabad, which is a solid rocket based rocket developing company. Both of them did suborbital missions of rockets. The Skyro did first, followed by the Agnikul.
And how many years from suborbital to?
Now it's almost a year plus now.
Yeah.
So they're hoping they will come out with a operational rocket now. Then I know about satellite companies who are doing very well. One, of course, is SatSure, which is an application company, not a satellite building company. Now they are going into satellite building also. Their subsidiary company is going to build. SatSure is a company who is using satellite data to build banking intelligence for lending purpose. So then I know about a company called Galaxy, which is again IIT Chennai incubated, which is working on integrating radar images and optical images into a fusion and give services for various purpose. Pixel is a company who has launched small satellites, and recently they launched a constellation of satellites which is hyperspectral, which can give you intelligence based on images, not just images alone. Then I know about Bellatrix, which is a company which I worked when I was director LPS itself to work on electric propulsion, and they made a propulsion system based on water based, and now they are working into space ducts and many other propulsion activities. Then there are two companies in Hyderabad, I think Digantara and the Dhruva, both are into satellite building and subsystems of satellite building. Some of them are working on solar panels and subsystems, some into the ground station operations and services, and both of them are aspiring to build satellites in small satellites and then supply for various users. So some of these companies are really worth watching for.
The gestation period, we have discussed this before, is for satellite companies 2 to 3 years before they really get satellites out there. For rocket launching companies with rocket capabilities, it's 6-7 years. The gestation period typically for most of these companies is about to revenue about 8 to 10 years.
It varies from the domain. For example, if it's a rocket company and they are developing everything from scratch, it can be 6-7 years from concept to launch their first rocket.
And then actually to get that to full
and
commercialization.
then operational stabilize
Another
and then
2-3
make
years.
it a commercially successful, bring revenue, then break even. It will take further years. So that's going to be the nature of the type of company. Though they may talk that I am going to do next year so many, but in reality it's not going to be so. But for satellites it is much better off because they are mostly building maybe 1 or 2 innovative product, but integrating most of the standard items into it. So they can realize that much faster. Suppose you make a good payload, you can create a satellite around it much faster because there are subsystems ready for procurement, and then you can integrate and then make, or even there are people who will be able to help them to build the satellite faster. Then there are other startups which are working on applications where there is more into software domain, images or communication or PNT services integration into various applications. But that requires very innovative approach, like companies like who has come recently, how to bring a new idea and then make it work with the traditional data and analytics. So these are more successful and their gestation periods are extremely less, could be 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years. Investments are low, risk is low. But if you are successful, it can be very fast scaled up. So,
are you seeing any companies there?
Company called SatSure, they are right here near to you in Bangalore. That company started by one of the ex-ISRO person, and this company is doing very well now. It is valued very high now. They are also into satellite building, but actually it's a core technology company. So what they do is they use images, and based on the images they do an analytics to help banks to underwrite the lending, etc. And banks are invested in to create it.
How are investors looking at this space, Prashanth? I mean, is this an attractive sector in India?
Definitely. I think this is one area where, because of all the work ISRO has done, the ingenuity of our startup entrepreneurs and where they are, I think this combination gives us a right to win. And we should get a reasonable chunk of this global pie. This $200-300 billion pie, I think a lot of it can happen from India. So early days, like I said, the amount of funding in going from investors in the private sector is still very small. Largely, supported because of all the work that ISRO has done. But I think moving forward, we should go from this 80 to 100 million a year to, $500 million at least in the next 2 to 3 years for it to really come of age and get to some scale. And I'm pretty confident, I think we are on the path to that.
But this gestation period, which is 6 to 10 years, is that too much of a hump?
Yeah, I think that will start, in my opinion, we will have to be a bit more choosy on what kind of areas we get into and which will attract investors more. So you will have a subset of them which will be long gestation, but you will have a lot of them application level and which will require shorter gestation. So I think all in all, in the next 2 to 3 years, I expect I get accelerated a lot faster than where we are today.
And you see investor sort of attention skewed towards more with shorter gestation period, I'm presuming.
Yes. I mean, that's the nature of venture.
Yeah.
See, venture investors don't want to, so we recently have just, put out a report on what is deep tech and what is R&D, right? So VCs don't want to fund R&D. I mean, that's the job of government and it's national capacity building, where the government builds these research capabilities. We want to be able to take stuff that is easily translatable there, where there is no fundamental technology risk, and help give startups enough capital to take them to market, right? So there is some amount of adoption and little bit of business market risks, but that should be the only risk, not the technology risk. So I think that, I think entrepreneurs are also learning, which are the right types of problems to choose. And with the guidance of people like Dr.
That's why we propose some model which is slightly different. For example, rocket building in the private. They have to learn the building tricks working with the organization like ISRO.
Yeah.
So one of the thing we did is the technology transfer. So SSLV as a rockets, we would like to hand over the technology to a private company. Teach them how to build a rocket. So let them work with us for some years, learn this, innovate on it, improve it on it, and then operate it on your own. So we have allowed that.
This is the new thing that
is happening now. Or in my opinion, a company which is going to build a rocket here, it is better to source some of the items from outside. For example, if an engine is available, bring that engine and work on that engine to make a rocket, which will be much more shorter. Later they can indigenize and make it. But if you start from the scratch, it is going to take a long time.
Before we dive into how you're looking at future and planning, and I know you're doing a lot of advisory sort of roles, something that you grappled with, your battle with cancer. And it is a dreaded sort of disease that nobody wants to talk about. If you are comfortable, it would be good to listen to you about your own journey, your own battles with cancer, and how did you overcome. More than the physical, many times it's the mental battle that one has to fight.
Even before that, Malini, I wanted to understand from him, and this will help a lot of people, what were the early warning signs? Yes. And is there anything different you would have done?
This is very important, because in cancer, the best thing that happens is early detection. Then the cure is very much possible. If it is late, then the issues are much more serious. For my case, I will tell you, there were symptoms. But then I went to doctors, really, and then doctors were not able to diagnose it as cancer.
What were the symptoms?
Symptoms were my back pain was regularly there, and then that changed into my motion not being regular. So these two were there, and back pain, I was going for some treatment, and they were telling this is nothing to do with the muscle sprain, you need to find out some reasons, but they didn't recommend anything else. Yeah. Unfortunately, the issue in India is that, see, we don't have screenings, no regular screening for people. No, because in the West, people undergo periodic screening and health checks, etc. Because there is a possibility of detection. We don't do that. And it is not possible in India to have everyone to go through screening. It is extremely costly for everyone to go through screening. If possibly a colonoscopy would have detected my case. So in my case, I detected it on my own initiative, not really by doctors. because it was not getting cured and I was feeling difficult. I have told it also in the open that on the day the Aditya launch was happening, I scheduled one scan myself, and it was not by a doctor. I thought that since anyway launch is there today and I was feeling difficult and early morning hospital would not have opened, even before that I will go there and request for a scan. So the doctor came 7 o'clock morning, I went there. I requested them to do a ultrasound scan. Ultrasound scan was the easiest scan available possible, and no other scan was available in our hospital. So I requested, why don't you do a scan for me, because I am feeling this regularly, anything is there. And on that scan itself, though nobody would have recommended for a cancer an ultrasound scan, they would have said a CT scan or MRI or something else. So I did an ultrasound, but even in ultrasound it could be detected that there is something not that good that need to be further investigated. That is, that clue came. So in fact, I understood that it is cancer only, because what else could be the worrisome. But then evening I had to do a colonoscopy and then understand that it is a cancer. So my learning from that is, when you have symptoms, it requires investigation. And luckily I didn't get into the complication, because on that day I felt that I should do a scanning. So sometimes people may not be lucky enough to do this. So I can only advise people that when you give symptoms which are persisting, which are there, definitely you should consult a doctor and then go through some evaluation. Don't leave it to chance.
Going back to Malini's question now, a little bit of a person, I mean, just was that a very tough period emotionally?
See, I always see it as a blessing. I don't see it as see, getting a cancer is always an experience. I was fortunate that I could detect it and I could get a good medical care to remove it and then go through post-treatment. But as a person, because I was holding an office which was very serious and very heavily loaded office, so it created some, as a person, I can tell you that not the operation, though that took few days off from the office, but subsequently I was going through chemotherapy, and chemotherapy definitely creates a lot of problem for anyone, because it creates body reactions and mood swings and concentration issues, sleeplessness and things like that, and I need to focus on work and I need to travel. And I still remember my blood white corpuscles count was coming down as low as 20,000. And I was traveling in flight, and doctors advised me, you should never take a travel with this type of count going down, both red corpuscles and white going down so low, not allowed for even to get out of home. But I traveled and I said, I am not going to stop. So they were so concerned. But then when I look back today, I am feeling happy, because I had a courage to face it, and then it helped me to overcome the mental torture that coming by focusing on work. So I fully dedicated that period to my work and various other things. So I forgot about what was happening to the body. So the body recovered faster. I understand that one of the best method for you to get out of such issues is to
keep moving,
keep concentrating on what you want to do. Your life, you focus your attention to your work and life. When you give more on stress, these things become secondary. And if you are worried too much about it, I think you become the victim of all of that. I think this is what I want to tell you people.
Lovely.
Lovely.
Fantastic
Thank you.
to speak to you.
Thank you.